Hey guys, it's the VC Angels Critiquer, and yeah, I've been better unfortunately. I was recently laid off of my non-YouTube job due to staff reductions, and while I don't have any grudge against my former company, it does still hurt. There's also matters like finding a new affordable apartment, the delay with getting my unemployment money. But on the bright side, I am really glad I waited to do this review now, because this is honestly the perfect time for me to do it. Not just because it's another great example of how woke works can be artistically good, but it's also a great story about how the Lord works in mysterious ways, and even when it seems like your life is completely sucking, He'll always be there for you in the end. That's honestly just the story I need to hear right now. It also happens to be Whoopi Goldberg's film debut, which I'm sure you can tell by my purple shirt is called The Color Purple. It's the story of Celie Harris, a young African-American lady growing up in early 20th century rural Georgia who's honestly had a pretty crappy life. She had her newborn babies put up for adoption against her will as a teen. Her dad is a pedophile who's sexually attracted to her younger sister Nettie, and he's recently dumped her into marriage with a scumbag alcoholic widower named Albert Johnson, nicknamed Mr., who clearly only sees her as an unpaid housekeeper and nanny to his children, and maybe a sex dummy if he's feeling horny enough. But thankfully, Nettie escapes from her mentally sick dad, and Mr. agrees to take her in, making for the happiest family reunion that ended almost as quickly as it began, when Mr. kicks her out when she resists him for trying to put the moves on her. And as Celie grows up, there's a lot of other challenges, like her stepson's marriage problems, racial discrimination, and her abusive relationship with her quote-unquote husband. But also some good, especially with Mr. having connections to a hit pop star named Shug Avery, who quickly becomes good friends with Celie, and maybe even a bit more. But the biggest disappointment of Celie's is that Nettie had promised to write to her every single day if they were separated, even going to the trouble of giving her reading lessons, but Nettie hasn't written even one damn letter in the 30 years they've been apart. Did Nettie really forget her sister? The story began as a novel by Alice Walker in 1982, then it was adapted to film 3 years later by director Steven Spielberg and starred Whoopi Goldberg in her debut role as Celie. Then it was adapted into a musical in 2005, and the musical was made into a movie only 1 year prior, with Fantasia Barrino reprising her role as Celie, also in her feature film debut. The story itself is nothing too spectacular, just the usual facing hardships, only remember God's still with you in the end story. But the story still has quite a bit of drama to keep us engaged, and more importantly, a lot of heart, especially in the third act. And it's just what I need with, oh wait, I just got a new job. Well, there are still others this tale can help right now. Now please note, I've never read the original book or seen the live stage musical, so this review isn't looking at which version is more faithful to either. In any case, like I've said before, more faithful doesn't automatically mean better. This is just looking at these two versions of the story completely on their own, and deducing which one in my opinion comes off as the better tale of how, even when your life is sucking hard, you gotta cheer up and never give up hope. Go for your dough. So as we all know, the good Lord works in mysterious ways. Maybe He's trying to tell you something right now about which film is better. This is Old versus New, The Color Purple. Joseph, Job, Ezekiel. There are so many people in the Bible that had to deal with a ton of BS, but learned in the end that God hadn't forgotten about them after all. And the same goes for contemporary times. Well, contemporary-ish. The story's on the age of electricity. That's the important part. So let's see which modern individual had their faith in God tested more with Best Celie. Our heroine Celie Harris, like said before, is respectively played by Whoopi Goldberg and Fantasia Barrino, coincidentally both in their feature film debuts. I can't act like Celie is the best written character, but she is still pretty likable. She's charmingly shy and awkward, but also delightfully driven and hopeful despite her miserable life by her #1 desire to be Shug Avery's backup singer. Be reunited with her sister Nettie, but all her hardships have had a bit of a toll on her ethically too. Like when she sees how happy her stepson Harpo and his new wife Sophia are in their marriage compared to her, she gets jealous and spitefully encourages Harpo to beat Sophia so she'll be more respectful to him. It does not go down well, needless to say. She's also not above spitting in her sexist father-in-law's water. Meh, could be worse, could be.
Next time he come, I put a little Shug Avery pee in his glass and see how he like that.
I stand corrected. But it's never to a point where she's unlikable, and this honestly makes her more relatable in my opinion. But I digress. Which portrayal is better overall? This one was kind of difficult because Whoopi and Fantasia do really damn well as Celie, both capturing her adorkability, drive, and most importantly, her love for Nettie, and determination to be reunited with her at any cost. But after careful consideration, I think I have to give a slight edge to Whoopi Goldberg. How come? Well, please remember that this story is about going through a hard life, and I just felt a bit more natural misery from Goldberg than Barrino. Those are definitely the eyes of a girl who's gone through years of stress and loss, and witnessed it happen to those she loves as well, but Whoopi also really conveys it in her vocal performance too.
She says she right, but she never right. She said only death could keep her from it. Maybe she dead.
Talk about an impressive film debut. As much as I loved Fantasia Barrino as Celie, I didn't really buy her as someone who's lived such a miserable existence. She just felt to me like her life was, well, mediocre at worst.
She must be dead. What kind of God are you?
Like, compare how both react to meeting their idol Shug Avery for the first time. Whoopi Goldberg was so psyched she couldn't move from where she was standing until she made eye contact with Shug. And that makes sense, because this is literally the greatest thing that's happened to her in so many long, miserable years. Barrino's first encounter with Shug was just her helping Mister carry her into the house when she passes out from intoxication. That's funny, sure, but not nearly as impactful. Another advantage the original Celie has is that her current situation happened to her when she was just a young teenager, whereas in the remake it happens when she's a young adult. I feel that being forced into a marriage with an alcoholic pervert at a young age just makes her situation all the more tragic. Also helps that the kid who plays young Celie is just as convincing as Whoopi at showing how unhappy she is.
Let us stay, please, let us stay. I'll do anything for you. Let us stay. Get the hell out of my house. Let us stay.
And again, Barrino's Celie is still very good, as is the actress of her younger self. She's just as caring and driven as Goldberg and is a damn good singer. But yeah, I just didn't see the same level of pain from her that I did with Goldberg. Also, Whoopi's Celie is a little more adorkable. Like, her interactions with meeting her idol for the first time and even dressing in her outfits are just so endearing. Now as for Shug herself in the remake, well, we'll get to that a bit later. But as for the two Celies, this one was close, but Whoopi Goldberg just felt a little more believable as someone living a Job-like existence, and had a bit more charming adorkability, thus barely taking home the gold here. Get it, gold like Goldberg? Yeah, let's move on. Point goes to the old.
I done had enough of you.
When you're going through hard times and depression, I think everyone can agree what the best thing to get you through that is. Prozac! But the second best thing is easily a loyal companion, be it family or friend, who's there for you to the very end. And Celie has a couple of these in the story, but the best one is easily her sister Nettie, who unfortunately is separated from her for most of the story. So let's see which one we want Celie to be reunited with more with. Best Nettie. Nettie is Celie's younger sister, who despite having limited screen time, still plays a very prominent role in the story as the biggest reason her sister has any hope in her life despite her horrid existence. Because one day, she may see her cherished sister, whom the story implies might have a bit more of a love for her than platonic. But don't worry, the story doesn't go into full doppelganger territory. But despite her hope, we learn that Nettie actually died a long time ago, hence why she hasn't written to Celie and all these. Nah, I'm just bullshitting! Mister had just been hiding her letters from Celie all these years, and the two are reunited at the very end. Come on, do you really think they tell a story this depressing without a payoff at the end? Anyway, Nettie's respectively played by Akosua Busha and Halle Bailey, and she's probably the character whose depiction differs the most in each version, where Akosua Busha portrays Nettie as very timid, introverted, and borderline catatonic. Halle Bailey portrays her with all the spunk, strong-willedness, and singing talent she had as live-action Ariel. Now this seems like another obvious point to the original, right? Busha's performance was a lot more believable as a girl living with a dad who's sexually attracted to her.
You know how he is. I ain't never gone back there. You hear what I say? I die first, Celie.
I gotta go to school. I gotta go to school.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he regularly pulled that whole "don't tell anyone or I'll hurt you" bullshit pedophiles tell kids. So just like with the original Celie, she seems more tragic and thus more sympathetic. So she wins, right? Well, You have to remember, her role in the story is a bit different than with Celie. Please remember that even though she's technically a main character, Nettie's only in the movie for about 15 minutes tops, and the majority of the film is us hoping Celie will be reunited with her. So where am I going with this? Seeing how she only has so much screen time, she only has so much time to make us just as determined to see her again as Celie. And considering how it was Bailey's charisma that saved the Little Mermaid remake from being yet another pointless dead fish in the water live-action Disney remake, yeah, black ladies can't be mermaids my ass. Halle Bailey's spunk really helps with her short screen time here. Just look at her reaction when Mr. first tries to hit on her.
Pretty little feet.
Now you lying. I'm a tomboy and I likes to climb trees. I got corns, bunions, and blisters. Ain't nothing pretty about my feet. Now leave me be.
Burn, bro. Another interesting thing is, despite technically still being the younger sister, she acts a lot more like an older sister and mentor to Celie, kind of like Shaw and Steve in The Good Doctor. We see her guiding Celie and providing emotional support very much in the way an older sibling would. She even sings her a somewhat cliched but nonetheless charming song about how to keep moving in hardship.
It's up to you the way you choose to go. Keep it moving, keep it moving.
Again, not the most original song, but Halle's spunk and motherly wisdom does make it pretty enjoyable. Granted, both versions teach Celie how to read, and they're both really endearing scenes, but I feel the way Halle does it is a bit more, well, mentorish for lack of a better word. And all in all, I feel this gives Celie more of a reason to want to be reunited with Nettie, seeing how they're not just sisters, but she's the parental figure who's gotten her through life with her mom's death, and their dad being an alcoholic, incestuous pedophile. So in a sense, Celie is wanting to be reunited with the true parents in her life. And again, Akosua Busha does give an A+ acting performance with her more neurotic take, especially in the scene where Mr. tries to rape her and then forcibly kicks her out of the house for using self-defense.
Ronnie! Nothing but death could keep me from it!
Halle does fine in the scene, but she's nowhere near on par with Busha. But yeah, I know I probably sound very cruel for saying this, but even though I did still feel very sorry for the original Nettie, I wasn't absolutely desperate to see her again as much as Celie because, again, they didn't give us much reason for us to want to see her again in her very short screen time other than she was miserable and Celie wanted to see her again. Bailey's more fun performance did make me want to see her again all the more, and I felt the more parental figure take on the character gave Celie more of a reason to want to see her again as well. I mean, in all fairness, it's pretty hard to compete with someone who can bring charm to a live-action Disney remake. Point goes to the new. But when you're going through hard times, one person alone may not be quite enough to provide the emotional support you need. Unfortunately, a good chunk of the supporting cast here is a bit less supportive to Celie, but they do still make for some memorable assholes that would not be out of place in South Park. So why don't we take a look at Best Supporting Cast? Let's start with Harpo's wife, Sophia. Once a headstrong, assertive chick that you'd regret messing with dearly. But 8 years in prison for standing up to a wealthy white man in 1920s Southern Georgia did break her physically and emotionally. At least for the most part. And while she does not take kindly to Celie's questionable marriage advice for Harpo, she's probably the third closest and most supportive character to her in the story. The second we'll discuss in the next round. She's respectively played by probably the most famous talk show host ever, Oprah Winfrey in the original, also in her film debut, and Danielle Brooks of the Orange is the New Black fame in the remake. This one was definitely the hardest to pick out because both actresses do phenomenally as the character, not only making you absolutely terrified to piss her off, but also when she's completely broken from the cruel racism of her time period. But after a very long and difficult contemplation on the matter, I think I like Oprah's Sophia a bit more. Like, compare how each version chews Celie out for convincing Harpo to hit her.
You told Harpo to beat me. I ain't never thought I had to fight in my own house. I loves Harpo, but I'll kill him dead before I let him or anybody beat me.
Yeah, Oprah's glare definitely made me want to piss my pants more. Not helped by she seemed to give a much more painful black eye to Harpo, but I guess that ultimately makes sense for her to be more, persuasive. I mean, she's frickin' Oprah, one of the most persuasive and influential women on the face of the earth. Also compare how each one handles the matter of Mr. refusing to give Sophia his blessing for marriage. In the remake, they can't convince him to welcome her into his house, so they just go and build their own house on a slate of land that Harpo's uncle left to him. In the original, she actually manages to intimidate Mr. into approving their marriage and letting her stay there. That's pretty impressive, even for Sophia. And while they're both clearly broken from their 8 years in prison, which I'll detail in a little bit, it's clear Oprah's stay was a lot more traumatic, with her now grayish hair and skin in a more catatonic state. And keep in mind, the character's only slightly younger than Celie. Not to mention the black eye the racist cop gives her while arresting her is permanent in this version. I guess Danielle pushed through it somewhat better because she's actually had experience in prison before. At least on Netflix anyway. But yeah, watching someone this strong-willed wind up this broken is definitely more tragic to watch. As for her ex-husband Harpo himself, well, ex until around the end anyway. Oh yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that Sophia divorces Harpo and takes their kids for his failed attempt at domestic abuse, and she got married to someone not relevant enough for me to talk about when she landed in the incident that got her arrested, but they make up in the end and that's what matters. Both are charmingly adorable, but I felt the original played by William Pugh was a bit more so, especially when he pathetically attempts to convince his dad that the black eye he got was from a mule rather than his wife.
It was that mule, Paul. Old Joy? Old Joy the mule? I tell you, I was out there trying to plow that Northfield.
No, that looked like a fist print.
Right? No, sir. Ain't no fist touch my face. No, sir.
Yeah, serves him right for being too sexist to admit a woman did it to him. What about Celie and Eddie's heartless father? Oh yeah, and did I mention that he's also the father of the 2 babies Celie gives birth to at the beginning?
This is too much, even for you.
Jeez, and I thought the doppelgangers were messed up. This character isn't in the movie much, so if you looked at these two and had to guess which one was an alcoholic, incestuous pedophile, which would you say? Yeah, probably the original again. He also seemed a bit crueler when putting Celie's new babies up for adoption the moment they were born at the very beginning. Same goes for Mr.'s dad, just a bit more naturally slimy and sexist in the original, and he looks a lot like Jerry Stiller, so that's a plus. I do like Shug Avery's estranged Reverend Father a little more in the remake, who disowned her for choosing the sinful life of a blues singer, but they make up in the end, which we'll go more into with the best story round. Anyway, I just felt that David Alan Grier seemed a bit more naturally like a preacher than Carl Anderson in the original. Plus, he does have more screen time and dialogue, although their reconciliation scene, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I also like Harpo's temporary new wife Mary Agnes, aka Squeak, better in the remake, but that was mostly because her squeaky voice is a little less annoying.
Who this woman?
You know who this is?
She best to leave you alone. Who this woman?
You know who she is, alright? We just found out really.
You ain't listening. I want to dance too.
I know I'm probably not one to talk given most of my early works, but I will say that hip-hop star HER did make my ears bleed slightly less. We do get a much better look at Sophia's new family in the original though, as opposed to just the roughly 50-second look we get at them in the remake. More info on that in the best story round. Same for the character who's largely responsible for Sophia getting arrested. Again, I want to talk more about her in the best story round, but point is going to go to the original is what I will say for now. And of course, there's Albert Johnson, better known by his nickname Mr., who's Celie's abusive husband and the main antagonist of the story, respectively played by Danny Glover and Coleman Domingo. And I'm sorry to say, but unlike most of the other characters, this one was not even close. Danny Glover wins this one by a long shot. Look, it has nothing to do with Domingo's acting. No, he gives just as good of a performance as the rest of the cast. My problem with him was the character of Mr. is supposed to be an intimidating asshole drunk. And while I definitely bought the asshole drunk part from Domingo, he was not intimidating to me in the slightest. Wearing a cowboy hat and playing a banjo didn't help with that much, needless to say. Hell, just listen to his love song that he writes for Nettie.
That's a real pretty dress, and your skin dazzles my eyes like that.
Yeah, as soon as I saw it in theaters, I was thinking, yeah, it's in the bag for Danny Glover. And even when he tries to be intimidating, I don't know if it's just my bias from his lame intro, but I just didn't feel much intimidation from him. I could tell he was trying.
I thought I told you not to touch the mail. Shug's coming shortly. Come shave me.
But he always just felt like a pathetic drunk loser that Celie could have walked out on years ago. Danny Glover, on the other hand, was a very intimidating alcoholic, and it's completely understandable why Celie was too scared to defy him for so many years.
I done fixed that mailbox so I can tell if it be messed with. You understand? You cut me and I'll kill you.
Like, compare the scene where he tries to rape Nettie. While I do like in the remake how it's shot in the dead of night, and I will admit this is one of the few times Domingo actually is a little intimidating, but he is still no match for Glover. From his smug, knowing smile he casts Nettie on his horse, to him disappearing for a second, to him mockingly dancing with Nettie, it's clear that this asshole is loving every second of torturing this poor girl with his demented mind. Also, while Domingo failed to rape Nettie, Glover was actually successful, albeit off-screen for obvious reasons, but I honestly think leaving it to our imagination makes the scene even more disturbing. So this made scenes like Sophia owning him and Nettie finally standing up to him all the more awesome. One thing to notice, the character actually does become a pathetic drunk loser the moment Celie leaves him, but in the remake it didn't feel as much like karma because he honestly seemed that way already. So all things considered, seems like the original had the slight upper hand with the side characters. Point goes to the old.
You's a damn lie.
Oh, the music industry, filled with such lowly and perverted pricks. So who would have thought a story filled with lowly and perverted pricks that a music star would have been our heroine's moral compass? Well, okay, Suge's not exactly a moral compass, no, she's not exactly ethical, come to think about it. But she is a good and loyal friend to Celie, and that's the important part. So why don't we see which one was a more loyal friend as Bash Suge Avery's coming to town. Suge Avery is an iconic blues singer, Mister's ex-girlfriend, and again, the second most supportive person to Celie after Nettie. Even if she's honestly a bigger trash bag than Britney Spears, it's not hard to see why she fell out of grace with her preacher dad. When Celie is the first person who treats her like a friend instead of a celebrity, she shows the heart of gold she has reserved for those who deserve it, eventually even becoming her girlfriend, best friend. Yeah, I think it's time to address something. Even though I've never read the original book, I have heard that it was flat out confirmed that Celie and Suge were flat out lesbian lovers. Well, bisexual rather. And they're that way in both movies too, the only thing is they never outright say it. Spielberg had said this was done to avoid an R rating since homosexuality was considered more taboo in the 80s. I can't say the same for why the new film did that, but trust me, if you thought Luz and Amity were obvious before they outright said it, these two...
What you staring at? Never seen a naked woman before?
Actions definitely speak louder than words, but even if she's not a positive role model overall, Suge is more than just a lover for Celie, she's a true friend. Hell, she's the one who figures out that Mister's been intercepting Nettie's hundreds and hundreds of letters to Celie. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to Nettie, she wound up in Africa with Celie's 2 babies taken from her at birth. It's kind of a long story, but the important part is that she's been a wonderful aunt guardian to Celie's kids, even with some adversities. But back to Suge Avery, just like with most of the other cast, Margaret Avery, hey, same last name as the character, and Taraji Henson both nail the character. They're both hilariously cynical and blunt, especially with Mister, but also capture her love and support for Celie, and both seem sour note incompatible with their singing. Yeah, the original may not be a musical, but it does feature 2 songs from Suge, Miss Celie's Blues and Maybe God's Trying to Tell You Something Right Now, both of which naturally appear in the musical, and in the 2023 adaptation. But I feel Taraji Henson had a slightly better connection with Celie. And I don't just mean on account of the lesbian romance being more evident in this version than in the original, although it is. But I just felt that the remake Suge genuinely cared for Celie a bit more than in the original. Hell, just listen to what the first thing Margaret Avery says when she first meets Celie.
You sure is ugly.
Granted, she does apologize later on for that, and admitted she only did so because she was jealous that she landed with Mister instead of her. Yeah, that doesn't last long. But it still wasn't the best first impression for her. Also compare how both Suges react to Celie sharing with her how her kids were taken from her the moment they were born. The original is basically like, whatever, but Henson's Suge is more sympathetic.
When you think about them, does your heart get full like the first time you held them?
Yes, ma'am.
But then they still alive. That's nature's way of telephoning.
Also, when Celie wonders aloud why, if God really loves her, her life's been a living hell since the day she was born, Suge actually has a logical piece of advice for her. God's not the one who brings misfortune into people's lives, our not-so-neighborly fellow neighbors do. And don't get me wrong, the original Suge did have some very sweet moments with Celie too. Like, I love how in this version, when she finds Nettie's note to Celie, she discreetly takes her aside and hands it to her without saying a word of dialogue, but you still feel all the emotion in her expression and the music. And the very ending scene where she reconciles with her dad, Well, we'll go more to that in the next round, but that's just a scene with so many layers, and well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. And as charismatic as both of them are, Henson just seemed to stand out a bit more. Like, her costume definitely seemed a lot more vibrant and extravagant, or just look how she makes her entrance in Harpo's bio joint. Yeah, I can definitely see why an entire town would devote a song to her entrance. Oh yeah, she has an awesome intro song, which is my favorite of the musical. That's kind of a gender-flipped version of We Love/Hate You Conrad from Bye Bye Birdie, where all the guys are stoked for her, but the girls, not so much. And the lyrics are really damn funny.
Skirt so short, gonna shock your mom. Make a man wanna break the law.
And again, that scene of hers in the original I'm building up so much is incredible to say the least. But as great as Margaret Avery was as Shug, Taraji Henson just had a little more charisma, as well as better chemistry and advice for Celie, thus making for the better girlfriend, bestie. No, I mean girlfriend. Point goes to the new.
You sure is ugly.
With the score all tied up, let's see which film had the story with more adversity, thus making the happy ending all the more warranted. This is Story for the Win. One thing I've noticed with my reviews is that there are some cliches or components of life that will never cease to make interesting tales no matter how often they're done. And this story I feel is one of the strongest examples of it. Like I said earlier, I ran into some minor life problems myself around the time I started this review, but conveniently, the more I kept going with making this video, I astonishingly found almost all of them were resolved. But anyway, this was just the review I needed to do right now, and I think I can see why this story is so beloved. I mean, people run into times where their lives can be pretty hard, either for just a little while like me, or for almost all of it like with Celie. But it's tales like this that remind us that the good Lord is still with us and will come through in the end. But if I had to choose which film was better at conveying this on the whole, I would have to give a slight edge to the 1985 original, and I think that's largely due to having Steven Spielberg as the director. One interesting thing to note is that Spielberg didn't initially feel he was qualified to direct this movie since he was white and didn't have a very good understanding of rural South culture. And while that may be true, and I myself am not one to judge how authentic this movie is to Southern culture, there is something that I feel did qualify Spielberg to make this movie. He's the guy who brought us An American Tail with Don Bluth only 1 year later, which is another tale about enduring hardships and misery while trying to be reunited with your family. And yes, I know that Don Bluth directed that film, but watching this movie definitely made me wonder if Spielberg had at least a little bit of a hand with directing it too, because a lot of Celie and Fievel's expressions look pretty similar. Anyway, my point for bringing this up is, we're all familiar with that movie's philosophy of how the more depressing a work is, the more warranted and epic is the happy ending. And it's clear that Spielberg already knew that philosophy damn well when he made this film, because yeah, his version of Celie's misfortune is almost as depressing as Fievel's. But thankfully, being Spielberg, it's still very dramatic and engaging. Not that the remake wasn't also, but well, let me share with you my experience with the two films. I saw the original for the first time with my dad on Christmas Day last year while visiting my family, and saw the remake in theaters on New Year's Eve with my mom. And while I did enjoy the remake, I remember thinking to myself in the theaters, why are these scenes not having the same impact on me that the original did? Yeah, I just wasn't quite feeling the same emotional impact. At first I assumed this was simply because the original was directed by Spielberg, one of the greatest directors who ever lived, but then I quickly picked up on what the real issue was. Since the newer film is a musical, it doesn't have as much time to devote to the actual plot itself, and this results in many sequences, such as when Mr. tries to rape Nettie and then separates her from Celie when she resists, feeling a bit rushed and not able to leave quite the same impact. Another notable example is this scene. The incident that landed Sophia in prison was the mayor's wife asked her to be her maid, and she said, "Hell no." The mayor hits her, and of course no one gives a shit, but of course when she hits back, she winds up in the pokey. While the scene in the remake is pretty to the point, the original is even worse by having the mayor's wife coddle Sophia's kids in a way that is not respectful to do so to a stranger's children, and even has Sophia called the N-word by several racist hicks after she smacks the mayor. After Sophia is released in the remake on parole as the mayor's wife's maid, she meets her family briefly when she's released, but the mayor's wife barely allows her a minute with them, Yeah, that's pretty cruel, but just look at this scene in the original. Here, Sophia's new boss decides to have heart after all and lets Sophia visit her family for Christmas, so naturally we get a much longer, more heartfelt reunion scene. But just as the mayor's wife is about to leave but is having trouble backing up, some of Sophia's relatives offer to help her out, and she mistakes her approaching her as attempted rape, which leaves her in too traumatized a state to drive home herself. And since she won't trust anyone in Sophia's family to drive her home, yeah, Sophia won't be home for Christmas after all. That definitely felt like a far more cruel psych scene that again makes it clear that the guy behind An American Tail directed this movie. It also doesn't help that, yeah, you guys are gonna hate me for saying this, but I don't think most of these songs are really anything special. Well, at least the majority of them. Yeah, all of Shug Avery's songs and her exposition song that the townsfolk sing kick ass, as does Celie and Nettie's reunion song at the very end, which is every bit as powerful and heartfelt as you would expect. And The Good Lord Works in Mysterious Ways and Keep It Movin' are good, and really showcase the story's theme on trusting in God and persevering. But as for the other songs, well, I don't think they're bad, I don't think they're especially original or honestly even all that memorable for that matter. But then again, I don't like Hamilton all that much either, so who am I to judge music?
He ain't nothing but a sack of dead horse shit, and horse shit belong in the ground.
Yeah, save the hate for the comments. But anyway, what really sold it for me was the ending. So after dumping Mr., Celie learns that her dad has passed away, and she inherits his shop to great success, and at long last is finally reunited with Nettie and her children when their immigration to America is arranged and paid for by, no, not Shug, by Mr. Yeah, like I said before, his life falls apart once Celie dumps him, and once he sees where his dickish behaviors landed him in life, finally decides to do something good.
Hell froze over.
And as incredible as the reunion scene is in both versions, what leads up to it is so much more effective than the original. No joke, this may be the most powerful and layered scene that Steven Spielberg ever filmed, and that's saying something. So Shug's in town for a concert and singing one of her blues songs, but happens to hear her father's choir singing a classic chorus song, Maybe God's Trying to Tell You Something, and Shug decides it's finally time to make things right with her dad, and does so by crashing the sermon with her friends and singing an Osseck blues-style version of the song, which in all honesty may be the most epic gospel song that was ever written. Though Second Chances from VeggieTales Jonah is a close second, and he accepts her apology with some very powerful shots of both of them.
See, Daddy, sinners have soul too.
But as the song plays, you can tell Celie's thinking, yeah, to everyone but me. Think again, Celie, because as the song is playing in the background, God first tells the audience how he's going to answer Celie's prayers by having Mr. make the arrangements for Nettie to come to America. And while he's doing this, you're thinking, no way, is he really gonna do it? And I guess the song also applies to Mr. as well. You know, God's finally been able to tell Mr. that you get what you give in the world and to do something good for once in his rotten life. It's just such an amazing scene. The remake, not so much unfortunately. The third act of Celie's dad's funeral, her inheriting the shop, and Mr. suffering drag on way too long. You'd think this would be better since we're seeing Celie finally get a happier life, and Mr. getting his just desserts, but all it really amounts to in this version is more of these songs that I don't find all that special. Speaking of songs, Maybe God's Trying to Tell You Something is reduced to a very brief piano duet between Shug and her dad in this version, and it's still pretty sweet and heartfelt, and they probably did this way to give a fresh take on the scene, but it's nowhere near on par with the emotional impact it had in the original. Also, it doesn't help that it doesn't even play while Mr. is redeeming himself by helping Nettie come home. And I just want to clarify, I do like the remake overall. It's still a very good movie, and to its credit, has an African-American director, so I'd say there's a decent chance it's more authentic to Black Southern culture, but I am not qualified whatsoever to say that with certainty. And Celie's reunion with Nettie and her now grown-up kids is just so emotional in both movies, but in terms of which film had the better journey of facing hardships and having your faith in God tested, having a legendary director like Spielberg really helped make said journey all the more engaging, giving it the slight upper hand to delivering the story's moral of how, well, I think another Spielberg film from Warner Brothers said it best. Point Ghost the Old, the slightly better film about working hard through a miserable life to earn your happy ending.
Hell no.